come off of, but to stay clean. And so I was just wondering if there was an inpatient that might, might be available in Washington State, just to give them that added support.
Correct. Well, this is like a really, 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 really big deal. If there isn't one in Washington State, I'll look that up after our meeting, but I'm like 95% sure there isn't, but I want to be 100%. But if there isn't one, if the family, this person needs to go to a program that offers neurofeedback, period. Or there's only about a 10 to 20% chance that it's going to be effective versus an 80% chance. And addiction is such a terminal disease that nearly, I don't want to put any fear in anybody around this. I don't know how I would communicate this to a family, or friends, what have you. But nearly everyone who I know who had a son or a child who's had an addiction in the last 25 years that I've been in this field, who has not, actually there's one person I know, somebody's mother, one who's been alive for more than 5 years. Nearly everybody else who didn't go to an addiction treatment center that offered neurofeedback in the last 25 years, they're dead now, and very premature deaths, and using related deaths. And none of them who've gone through, have done 12 or more sessions of the Scott and Kaiser modification of biofeedback, that I've heard through the grapevine have yet died from it. So it's a really, really big deal that it's not just, it'd be nice if it offered this or that. It's, that's what I'd have to say about that. It is a very, so if they're thinking that it needs to be in that area, I don't know, so they can visit them or something like that. That would be nice.
It's not about that. It's just that they have Medicaid, and I doubt that a treatment facility outside the state will take them with Medicaid from Washington State. And maybe treatment centers even within Washington State might not take them. So they have a limited number of options because of their insurance. So that's why.
Yeah, let's look that up when we get on our individual call today. We'll do it.
Okay, sure.
We'll look around and we'll see what might be available in that area. But we'll check that out. All right. Hello, everyone.
Morning.
Welcome to day 2. So we usually start this out with some questions and answers, and then we're going to carve out a minimum of about 20 minutes today to cover when and how do we reevaluate people, because that's something that's going to give us about 25% better results, as we mentioned last week. That if somebody has not improved over the previous 5 sessions, when you're doing 2 or more sessions per week, or 10 to 12 sessions if they were only doing once per week, that protocol will never start being effective for them. So it's a good thing to know. But any questions that have come up over the last week, or some clarification of anything you thought I said and someone thought I said something different and things like that, any questions that have come up? Was that a question? I can barely hear you on it. Was someone on a telephone here? Is that a question?
Oh, I think I'm on the phone. This is Jody, but I didn't have a question. I maybe forgot to mute.
Okay, Jody. All right. Well, here we go. This is where the rubber meets the road. All right. Then what do we do in terms of when do we reevaluate people? So we're also going to get a little bit more into some of the mechanisms of neurofeedback, and working with people with obsessionality and also with character disorders, which takes us into the countertransference categories, and qualities of excellent technicians. And also, we got into this quite a bit last week of working with kids under 8 or those with severe neurologic deficits. We'll see if anything else comes up. And then we'll also cover BrainPaint updates and versus Windows updates. In fact, why don't we, that's actually where I want to start. So I'm going to be sending out an update today that's going to simplify the process of creating growth areas to make quantifiable growth areas. But when we have we try our best to not annoy people with updates like most of your software nowadays does. And so what we do is hi, you who just called in, if you're hearing me through the computer and your telephone, you can then hang up your telephone and it'll stop that echo sound that had started. I'm going to unmute you now. It sounds like we're at a rave, right? I had to mute you. Yeah. So yeah, who it was who just if you're on a telephone and you're hearing the computer, go ahead and hang up the telephone. That will stop that feedback sound, but I need everyone here. Mike, I think that's you actually. Or maybe Mike, I think there might be 2 people in the room. One person with who are logged into 2 separate devices watching the meeting, and then both of your devices are hearing me perhaps. If one of you, if you could perhaps, if that is the case, if one of you could just share the other's device and follow along on one, that would allow us to have this in real time. I'm going to try unmuting you here again. Let's see what happens.
Unmuted.
Oh.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, but I think there's still somebody on a telephone maybe who is there's somebody on a telephone who is listening to me through the telephone and through the computer, but they're probably not monitoring the webinar, so they probably left the room, I suspect. Okay. I'm going to try to unmute everyone again here. All right, that is stopped. We're clear as a bell again. Thanks. Okay. So when BrainPaint sends out an update, it's very subtle. It's going to look like this. Down in the bottom of your screen, it'll say what software version you have, and then it will say what software version awaits you, and then also how do you get that. It says double right-click on any client file to get it. I'm going to show you what we mean by that.
Bill?
Yes?
This is Deborah. Mine doesn't look like that.
No, that's because you don't have an update ready. You don't have an update ready yet.
I thought it was because I was on a different platform, or remember we dealt with that last week.
Yeah, no, this is what yours will, when we send out an update, when you run your main BrainPaint program, when it's been on for about 10 to 15 minutes, that's when we would see this down here.
Okay.
So how we would see that screen, how is the main BrainPaint program. We put our mouse over the BrainPaint icon here on our desktop. This should be this. When we put our mouse over the icon, and we double left click twice fast for Mac users, it runs this program. So let's go ahead and do this now. It'll always get 34 more sessions when it has an internet. And then this is where, when the next update comes, we would see it down here, Deborah.
Okay.
after your computer's been on for about 10 minutes. Yeah, so eventually you'll see that, and then how we get it is just like what the webinar showed, is it says double right click any client file to get it. I'm just going to show you exactly what we mean by a client file. When I hit the start session button, it brings up our client list, and these are the client files here. So we just double right click, it said any client file. That takes us to these advanced options. Up here it tells us that also. Double right click for advanced options. And we'll just double right click on that client file there, and it takes us to the advanced options, and here it is. It says get the latest BrainPaint update. So when we had one, that's all we do. We click that, and it'll take about 5 minutes on average, 10 minutes if you have a slow internet connection. So it's good to be aware of that. Another thing is there'll be times that this is not going to happen on most of your machines. But unfortunately, those of you who have to have our latest version of Windows, which is Windows 10, they force updates, and there's absolutely no way to stop them. So periodically, you'll see a message pop up on your screen like this. It says, we've got an update for you. And it'll say restart now, pick a time, or snooze. If it's during a session, it's a good idea to just click the snooze, and that will go away. That will happen periodically, and it is annoying. And Microsoft, I just looked yesterday, they have 1.6 billion complaints about this by people. So if and we only have 7.5 billion people on the planet, and they don't care about this horrible problem. I've had 2 medical appointments myself that were delayed for 20 minutes as people were updating their machines. One time I had to wait for an hour before I could check into a hotel in Europe because their Windows was forcing updates on their machines, and there's nothing you can do about it except cringe and click the snooze button. If it's if it's at the end of but what will also happen when you click snooze, or to get rid of it, or it'll sometimes say, do this later. Then what you'll find is at the end of the day, this again will not affect you, Deborah, so don't worry about this. We were able to prevent this on your beautiful machine. That's not Windows 10. But for everybody else who does use the Windows Start button to shut the machines down, you'll see this. That will say update and shut down, or update and restart. If it's at the end of the day and you can leave your computer on all night or something like that, it's a good idea just to click the update and restart and go. And then the machine will take care of itself. But if it says, if you click the update and shut down because you have to take the computer home because maybe it's not a secure environment or something like that, I would encourage you that before you use the computer to see a client, that you turn it on first, like maybe 15 minutes or so before you see your first client, because after you turn it on again, Windows will often be completing the update or doing some additional things occasionally. It'll usually take just 5 minutes or so, but it has taken up to 15 to 20 minutes in some rare instances. And so you're all ready to start to running a client, and they're all ready, you've chatted for a few minutes, what have you, now it's ready to start. You have to wait for it. It's kind of disrupts your flow, but that's one way that you can prevent sort of disrupting your flow, is by clicking the update and restart, or you can't start it later. The other thing to be aware of is if you started the update, then you close the lid of your laptop. That would prevent it. It's not going to do it halfway. Also, finally, don't interrupt the process. If you started it, and it's saying updating, don't like press and hold down your Windows Start button. That can actually make it so we have to replace the computer, and kind of you'd be out for a while if you try forcing stopping that. Then it'll mess the computer up, which is, yeah. Anyway, those are the two types. So there's Windows updates. You can delay them, but if you're on Windows, the Windows 10 machines are the only ones you'll ever see these messages like that will say update and restart, or update and shut down, or those other ones that will pop up in front of your screen. Okay. Any questions on that? So next, plateaus. Yeah, again, improves results by 25% at least. So if somebody hasn't, over the previous 5 sessions, someone has plateaued. So I'm going to show you what we mean by that. So these are the 3 criteria of when we reevaluate people. And then I'm going to show you how we do it, because how we do it is basically the same in all 3 of these. Third thing that we'll do in some cases that I'll show you next week of conducting a brain print, sometimes on people's foreheads. We'll get to that next week. But here are the 3 criteria. This is the most common one here, of where they've been progressing well for any number of sessions, but for the last 5 sessions, they've not had more than 10% improvements on all meaningful growth areas. So this is where the issue would come in. If we don't have quantifiable growth areas, people will need to eliminate all aspects of a problem before they're going to be clear that it's getting better. So somebody said, my client wants to reduce anxiety, or reduce anxiety by 50%, right? That'd be wonderful, right? It's just not quantifiable. What's 10% less anxiety? Nobody can tell, just from their own sort of subjective basis. But when we have the behavioral outcomes of those emotional issues, like we covered quite excessively last week, then they'll see it precisely as it's happening, easily, conservatively speaking, well within 5 to 8 sessions. So that's the primary criteria. And so here's how we would do it, given that it's the most common. We click the Start Session button, and I'm going to open up a client file, which I hope is one that has some previous experiences, previous sessions. Let's see here. Brian. Here we go. So we open up the most recent client file. It's one that has the highest number after it here. So we're going to double left click on our client file. And now we click on this button over here that says Client Report, right here. Click on that. After reviewing Brian's report, also develop the habit of reading all of these things when you first start doing it. Just taking 20 seconds here and there to read some of these things will go a very long way. You might tell your client, okay, at this machine, we have this 100-page manual, but if I just read these messages here, it's going to save me from reading most of that manual. Okay, and so it's saying that after reviewing Brian's report and subsequent windows, you have to close it to get back to that screen we were just on. So that you won't, that it's telling you how to do that, so you have to close it when you're done. It was also saying that sometimes if a graph isn't showing up, you might have to click this thing that said allow blocked content. Okay, so here we are on the client report. There's a thing here that says total growth. And what we're looking for, when I said 10%, have they made progress 10% in the last 5 sessions, this is where we can see it. So often they'll go off the screen. And so we're going to click this little minus button. So it's like a Google map here that'll allow us to see it. And so from here to here is like 20 points in an upward direction. So we just count over the last 5. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And that is not going up by more than 10 points. It's not going up more than twice the distance in this here. So we can see that this is what we would call a plateau. This client that could keep doing 1,000 of these sessions, showing up for years. And they still have some significant gains to make in all of their combined growth areas. They're only 80% better here after 23 sessions. But if you kept doing this protocol, this client would never make any more progress. You'd be wasting their time and their money. And if you have a really busy caseload, where you have waiting lists and things of that nature, then somebody's taking up slots needlessly where you can be more helpful for others. All right, so that's how we recognize it. So I'm going to click the little red X here. And it said to close this window like that. And that brings this back here. So that's a plateau for this client. So the next slide I'm going to show you now, so that's when we do it. We've identified when we do it. And here is how we do it. So I'm going to go to our next slide. So how to use the software to get rid of alpha theta sessions. This is what we do. So we're going to look to see here. Our client has alpha theta as one of their protocols here. Right, there it is. It has minutes assigned to it. 3 protocols. One with alpha theta, it's always done with the eyes closed, and 2 eyes open protocols. So if, let's say for example, now, so that was one of the criteria. I'm going to go through the other criteria now, because that was one of them. That's when we do it. Next, I'm going to be showing you how we do it. So another would be the client has clearly not made progress in their first 5 to 10. So they've not made more than 10% improvements in all meaningful growth areas in their first 5 to 8 bi-weekly sessions, or 10 to 12 sessions if they were only doing this once per week. And why do we say clearly not made progress? Well, if you have for it, we can't just always take a client's own self-reports as indications that they're not making progress or are. So in the cases of people who are 17 years old and under, their prefrontal cortex isn't fully developed yet. And if we're asking 17-year-olds, in fact, even if they're better, you're likely to get everything's all resolved better than ever after one session, or worse than ever after one session, or I don't know, is a fairly common response. You're going to get those responses probably about 60 to 70% of the time with anybody. We're asking them, when they're even 17 years old or under. That's kind of what we're going to get too frequently. So in those cases, we need to ask a parent on a weekly basis how they're doing. So we can adjust these sliders here to indicate the amount of progress they're making in these growth areas, so that we can know when it's time to do this or not. Similarly, if you're working with some of the, like we're going to get more in depth with the people with character disorders and or excessive obsessionality, their ability to report is typically quite lacking also. And that's where getting collateral information can also be very invaluable. But also using your own observations as well. When you're their primary therapist, you've known them for many, many years, typically those other 2 populations I mentioned, and you can tell when you create growth areas of things that you've observed that appear to be most attracting to the quality of life, just in your conversations with them prior to sessions, that stuff's going to come up typically. So, yeah, but they may say, nope, it's worse than ever but you were having nightmares 6 times a week, and now it's 4. That is a 25% improvement, and just slide the sliders according to your own observations always when it's clear that the person is not reporting accurately. Or if somebody comes in and they're really spun on a particular day, and it's like you get that, you're saying everything's worse than ever, then just go, you know what, how about today we not document this? I understand you're kind of a really bad place right now, and let's not expect that you feel wonderful during your sessions, these initial sessions. That's never necessary. If that were necessary, nobody would ever get results with this. So let's see how you're feeling after we've done between 5 and 8 of these, and not document the progress today. We'll get to that next. That can go a very long way to get accurate information in terms of responsiveness. So that's the second criteria, just no progress. But let's say, for example, in your own observations, you've done between 5 and 8 initial sessions, whatever the software come up with, no clear progress that you're seeing, the client's not seeing it, or a collateral contact's not seeing, that would be one of them. And the third criteria would be the client is reporting negative side effects that are clearly outweighing the gains that they're making. Here, clearly is the operative word. Why I'm emphasizing that word is, more so than not, even your clients who are very self-aware, kind of very eager, with the process, they're into it, they like it. If it took somebody an extra 15 minutes to fall asleep at night, they're often going to come in, and the next day they might go, hey, something's wrong with that protocol. It took me an extra 15 minutes to fall asleep last night. And then if you're a new provider, you'd likely be going, oh gosh, yes, I guess so. Where's the fall asleep 15 minutes faster? But Bill, we need to fix this. We need to do something different here. Is a very natural reaction if you're new with the technology. However, there isn't one. And sometimes as some things get better, some things can get a little bit worse. And they're going to notice it because we're asking them about falling asleep, staying asleep, mood, energy in the subsequent screen after we click save notes and start feedback in a subsequent session. And so they're going to be more aware of these things. Or when we have a growth area about sleep and it actually took them a little bit worse, longer to get to sleep. So when they come in and somebody says, geez, I have this negative side effect. What do we do about that? The follow-up question is, if we had to sacrifice some of the gains you're making to get at this negative side effect, would that be worth it to you? I'll let you write that down. It's because it's really a very important question. If we had to sacrifice some of the gains you're making to get at this negative side effect, would that be worth it to you? And then let me write that down. Because here's the thing. If we reevaluated them right then, okay, well, let me back up. Quite frequently, so we often say between 5 and 8 sessions to talk to your clients about. Between 5 and 8 sessions is where we're typically breaking records. That's very conservative. It's actually more between 3 and 5 sessions that your clients will be breaking records. But never tell them that. And don't expect it, because it's not going to happen always. But so what will often happen is after between 3 and 5 sessions, some things will be getting better, and sometimes some things will be getting worse. And so if a client's migraines have already reduced significantly, but it's by the frequency of them per week, and the duration when they come on, how long they're lasting, for example, and that's reduced, they're not going to be typically looking at that. They're going to be thinking, they're going to be focused on this one thing. Or I was waking up 4 nights per week after I fell asleep. Now it's 2. That's 50% better after 3 to 5 sessions typically. There too, we'd say. So usually then, when you ask that important question, if we had to sacrifice some of the gains you're making to get at this negative side effect, would that be worth it to you? Then they'll usually go, oh, and they'll pause for a moment. Oh gosh, no, absolutely not. I was thinking that typically is what they'll respond with, and so we wouldn't change it in that case. So when I'm talking about this reevaluation, we're not talking about those questions about falling asleep, staying asleep, mood, energy in that screen. We're talking about this button right here, reevaluation. So currently, this is one of the things that software doesn't do, artificial intelligence doesn't do that well, is to be able to discern a clinician, a client's ability to report accurately and or a clinician's ability to create quantifiable growth areas. So we're not able to have the AI have all that much hands-on. There are some things that I'm going to be adding in here in the near future that will assist with that. Like if a client was moving around too much in a session to get results, it's going to say, hey, let's not do anything different with their protocol. We have to get them to be more still. This isn't going to work for them no matter what we do. That'll be easy for it to see. It will also, if you haven't created a quantifiable growth area, like if you left one of these blank like this here, the software can look at it's going to look at the evaluation, and it's going to go, oh, they reported having at least X number of headaches per week. I'm going to create a growth area on that. Or they reported trouble falling asleep, 3 or more times, 4 or more times. But I'll create a growth area for you for that. So it's going to start doing that in the very near future. Probably actually after this next update, I'll be releasing by Monday. It'll probably be doing some of that also. Okay, so what do we do? So let's say in this case here, this second scenario where a client, you don't see it, the client doesn't see it, no other collateral contacts, if that's available to you, see that they've made any progress at all. Or even if they're saying you get to between 5 and 8 sessions, and most clients will be, when they haven't responded well, they'll actually be kind of like this. They'll be like, well, maybe this is a little bit better. Maybe I'm falling asleep a little more easily, or maybe I'm not raging quite as much, but I did have 6 of those ragers happen this week. Still, it'll be kind of this wishful thinking, but when it's an adult, or often by the parents, when you're seeing them thinking a lot about progress and kind of hemming and hawing about it, we're not cutting it yet. That's a good indication that we don't have the correct protocol. And you're going to get that from everybody, even somebody who's reduced all of their symptoms by 50%. If we don't have a quantifiable growth area, they're all going to be hemming and hawing. And you're going to feel stressed about asking about the growth areas when they're not quantifiable. And if you're having any trouble with that too, let's set up an individual consultation call, because I can often be very helpful with you in creating those. Another thing with this update that I've already added to it, but it's not available yet, but you'll see it, is they're going to be the first 4 growth areas are going to they're going to have behavioral issues. It's going to be the category, and they're going to be things that nearly everybody with anxiety and everybody with PTSD and everybody with any forms of depression are likely to have as a quantifiable growth area. It's going to be at least 2 times per week. I find myself crying about something. Period. Right? That's there. Or at least 2 times per week, I find myself raising my voice at someone. Or at least 2 times per week, I end up getting angry and breaking something. So there are these kind of very generic things that everybody who has any problem, or I get I get into conflicts with someone, heated arguments at least 2 times per week involving things not going my way or things not going client's way. That's all right. So that is going to further simplify it, growth areas. And so, what do I mean by that? Where can you access what I'm just discussing? Here's another place that you can access these growth areas, because they're so closely tied to, nearly doubling your client retention rate as well is when we have quantifiable growth areas. So if you have a growth area here, we can always change them at any point here by clicking this little question mark. See this growth area I'm pointing to here? There's a little question mark here to the left. We can click on that, and it'll bring up these pre-recorded growth areas. So these behavioral ones I'm mentioning are going to show up here first in this list. And so we can just select one. So So I get mad and break things. And then when we see that there's an X like this in here, or a number of times that doesn't match your particular client, just type the number in that it's actually happening. Or if it says at least 2 times per week when it's at least 4 times per week, change the number from 2 to 4, whatever matches your own client's number. All right. So that is that. So here's how now, when our client has alpha theta, how do we use the assessment tool to get rid of it? So why this is really important is that in these cases where the client has not made any clear progress in their first 5 to 8 sessions, if you just click the reevaluation button and just asked all the questions again, and they've not made any progress, it will come up naturally with the exact same protocol. So we don't do that. Here's what we do. Again, we look to see that they have alpha theta minutes assigned. Yes, they did. So here's how we use the assessment tool to get rid of them. We click the reevaluation button, and we arbitrarily do 3 primary things. To get rid of alpha theta, we arbitrarily click issues are more physiological in nature. We arbitrarily unselect here primarily wants to overcome fears. Arbitrarily we do that, and we arbitrarily deselect these lower right 5 PTSD items down here, just like that. We can review these other items. One thing here, if this about caffeine over here is not checked and more on caffeine is also not checked, you do not have a valid assessment. You don't have accurate enough information for the software work period. We didn't read every single one of these questions and ask your client each of these before checking or leaving it unchecked for various items on the screen. The next update's going to also have some validity features on that as well to make suggestions, so that when a clinician skims through their own assessment, for example, it's going to say, can't do that. We need to get as accurate of information, even for you, probably most importantly for you, so that you'll have a good experience, your own good experience with this. Okay, so after we've done those things, does anybody want me to repeat that? How we use the assessment tool to get rid of alpha theta? I'm just going to see if anyone's been asking chat questions here. I'm not seeing no chat questions. Okay. So then we click the Get Protocol button down here. And for this, pretend client's going to crunch out an additional client file. It's going to have a -4 on it. But again, we never click the new evaluation button for an existing client. Okay, so then we click the Start Session button here. And now we're going to, here's our newest client file. We're going to double left click on this client file. One thing too, for those of you who have multiple machines that are all networked together as well, the client files aren't going to always show up at the top of the list like this one here just did. It might be further down. I'm going to double left click on that. And here it is. Now we have an all eyes open training protocol here, and we will continue running that. So here now I'm going to walk you through what we do in the case where someone's plateaued or there was a negative side effect that was clearly, they plateaued for the previous 5 sessions, or they had not made any significant progress in the first 5 to 8 sessions, not more than 10% improvement in all combined meaningful growth areas, or there was a negative side effect that was outweighing the gains that they were making, and they did not have alpha theta protocol. Here is what we do. We click the re-evaluation button. This is how we could usually add alpha theta training into the mix. We just do the opposite of what we just did before. So arbitrarily click the trauma item. We click the primarily wants to overcome fears. We review these items down here. Also, the about panic, we'll really want to pay close attention to for every client, always for those. But when we click that one, it's always going to give us that distraction exercise when we're conducting alpha theta sessions, and it's going to get rid of the all eyes open training in their first alpha theta session as well, and just give them 7 minutes of the alpha theta. So be aware of that. So the bottom item there clarifies that for us. Then we're going to click the Get Protocol button. And I am needing to take a quick break here. I'm going to be back here within 3 minutes. I'll be right back. Drank too much caffeine this morning. Okay, I am back. So that is, I'm going to show you here what that did. Well, it created a third, a fifth client file in our list here. And also, we have a bunch of features here that we could archive clients, we could delete them, we could send them to another practitioner. There's a lot of things we can do file related. However, it's a good idea to just leave the previous client files in the client list. The software is going to look back at them to see what we did and why we did certain things. Currently, that's how that's happening. Eventually, it's going to be a long time from now, but eventually, it's not going to be creating additional client files every time we click the Get Protocol button, but it is a huge job in the back end to change that. But this is a button right down here. If you, and some of you have a very short-term treatment program where you won't have the ability to give your people 12 or more sessions, and so we have providers basically everywhere in the world. Everywhere in every major city, basically in the U.S., that you could refer them to, of course, with the appropriate release of information, things of that nature. If you click this button down here, it's probably the most common use of this. And it will bring up some features to, for example, send a client to another provider. So you click the client name down here. It just says send checked clients to another provider. It'll go through that procedure of what to do there. So that is that. Who here has practiced on themselves in the last week? Who on the call has practiced with themselves? Or on someone else? Practice with the equipment period this week.
I did. is Jody.
Hi, who is this?
Jody, I did.
Oh, hi. You said Jerry, correct?
Jody.
Jody. All right, very good, Jody. And uh, say that again.
Oh, I just did. I did an evaluation on myself and then on my spouse. We did it. I did have a question. When I did the first feedback with him, he said that he was seeing a lot of negative images in the brain stuff. Is that pretty normal?
Yeah, but well, it's someone. If someone, like a lot of people, when they're kind of first doing this, they kind of feel a lot. People who feel a lot of negative emotions often, or when they're feeling negative when you're doing something, you're going to tend to see more negative images in something. So it's a subjective experience. Chances are that after the person's done between 5 and 8 sessions, that they'll likely start having more positive associations. The images will be different, and some say they become more positive, but you'll have a lot of clients. Probably the majority of people will experience them as being more pretty and or beautiful versus kind of frightening. But some people's brains do create images that would, in my observations, are darker or lighter, not in terms of from sort of an emotional level versus brightness, and some make images that have prettier colors that mix together more nicely than others. There's no reason why that is. That we can clearly see where somebody's at spiritually, emotionally, and cognitively doesn't have any impact on that phenomenon. Over the last 12 years, I probably look at 1,000 images a week from people's sessions and things like that. And there's no kind of rhyme or reason to that, but some people make them more pretty than others. But it's more, I would tell the client that it's more likely, it's just the associations they happen to have on around the process. Like if somebody gets what we call spooked by the process, where where in varying degrees, people will embrace newer technologies in different ways, and there tends to be sort of like a fear of new paradigms. That's kind of like it's the devil's work kind of a thing. If somebody brought up an iPhone, back around the turn of the century, that's how it would have a very negative association attributed to it. And so that may be a factor sometimes in how one sees it. If somebody's feeling like, gosh, this looks very easy, I'm just frightened by it for some reason. That's just usually it's the paradigm paralysis that's kind of that they're in around the process, where they may have more negative association with sounds and or images, or maybe even your chair sometimes. If your chair isn't comfortable, it's this and that. So those are some ideas on what that is. But yeah, we don't know why sometimes the images will look more positive or negative. There's also one thing that can happen that I've noticed with that. If there was someone a number of years ago who, so we had a provider who was referred by another neurofeedback company who said, hey, why don't you work with BrainPaint instead of us? Who the clinician wasn't in that great of a place. I'm not going to get into the details why, but they were going through their own, I would say, a spiritual crisis, and they happened to get what I would suspect was a client with a significant character disorder, who observed, was doing, they did an alpha theta session. It was like, wow, it was kind of calm and nice. And then they did their 10 minutes of eyes open training, which I actually consulted with the clinician, said, hey, don't start with this client. It sounds like they have a character disorder. We don't want you starting with anybody with a character disorder ever, kind of a thing. And she did anyway. And then she didn't use this, the distraction exercises that we did. She let the client run for the full 30 minutes. And the client got kind of creeped out sitting there for a half hour toward the end of the alpha theta session. This is what she reported in her blog. And then when she's doing the eyes open training, she had all these negative associations with the images and how evil they were and how horrifying and traumatic that was, and reported being traumatized. Well, it's kind of like, it's amazing how contagious hysteria can be with people with characterological issues. And so that often when some people have found that particular blog and have read it, that they'll then have those kinds of associations also. It's contagious, I swear. But anyway, that's a possibility also. If someone had found that, but it's also, it's not one of the reasons. We're very well aware of that for the last 20 years of, start working with people with character disorders. There are some things that through countertransference that can be quite contagious. But anyway, those are some. Any other thoughts on that? Okay. Any other questions on that particular population, or on anyone else's experience of running sessions last week? Okay. So another thing too, if there's anyone who is feeling frightened by the process, I would encourage you to just turn the computer on and just look at the screen and go, what would I do if I wanted to do a session on myself? What would what would I need to do? Because sometimes people will think that before you can double left click on this icon, they'll make a mistake thinking that I need to have everything Bill said in that 6-hour webinar memorized before I can do that. It's really not that way. We've designed this system so that it's like an ATM machine where you only have the options available for what you do. So it's like if you accidentally click the client file, for example, you'd see there's no clients to run except for our demonstration crash test files. It's like, okay, well, you close that out, and then it'd be, I guess I have to click the view evaluation button first. And then after you did that, then you would know, well, then now to start the session, I'd have to click the start session button. So the machine is designed to walk you through all of the things that I taught you, and that are also in that manual that Allison had sent out as well on Monday. So that's that. Is there anyone who is, it can often be valuable. You might be surprised if you are feeling intimidated by the technology. You might be surprised how there are others who might be feeling that same way, or if somebody was feeling that way and then did just jump in and one day turn the machine on and saw what it could do. Is anyone, Riverstones, is there anyone there who was initially feeling like, gosh, I don't know if I remembered anything he taught, but once you sat down with the machine, found that. Yeah.
We had the 2 people that are going to be using it with the kids, but they didn't have any issues with it. They said they've been using roommates to do the assessment. They haven't done the actual session piece, but the getting all the questions and the assessment, they hadn't had any issues with that.
Okay, very good. Yep, very good. Excellent.
Bill, this is Kathleen, and I think I felt actually quite intimidated afterwards, and And I know we're going to have this session after, but it seems like a lot. And my fear is that if I start out and my client has a negative experience, that it will be harder for me to calm them down because I don't have that experience, right?
Yep.
So, yeah. And I'm going to practice on myself first, and but yeah, I feel intimidated.
Got it. Yeah. And so the one thing about the negative experiences is they're never going to be anything worse than what happens once in a while with a client anyway. And we don't want to mistake an existing problem with something else. So, Kathleen, as long as you do not start with anyone with significant obsessionality, and you do not start with anyone with a character disorder, you're going to have a great experience with it, period. If you do start with someone with those two issues, you cannot have a positive experience. It's impossible, essentially. They're going to pick up on your discomfort around the paradigm, and they're going to be reflecting that more than any effect that the machine can have. As you're putting the sensors on their head, they'll be saying, "Hey, I'm getting stressed already." It has nothing to do with the feedback whatsoever. It's just counter-transference. But you have I think you had where you came from, Kathleen, is very different from like 99% of all of our providers in the last 7 years have all come from word of mouth referrals. So they talk to other people who are using BrainPaint first, and they go, "What are you doing?" "Oh, we're doing this thing. It's really cool. It looks great," and blah, 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 blah. And then they're like, "Wow, this is neat." But you came to this, I believe, if I recall correctly, you had a client who had done some sessions or something like that, and then said, was that correct, Kathleen?
Yeah, a client, one that had neurofeedback, not BrainPaint, had a really positive experience. Another client whose friend had BrainPaint and wanted that for herself. And then a friend who had a friend who went to BrainPaint and had a really positive experience. So yeah, mine was different. I came as a result of feedback from people who had actually experienced it.
Yeah, and this might seem strange, but in terms of we used to we advertised once in the Manhattan area. We thought, "Oh my God, Manhattan really, really needs this," and so we advertised. We trained about 20 clinicians in that area, and what we found was that it was very effective at drawing in new providers and things of that nature. But there was a very different quality about them than people who have heard about it from other clinicians. There's like someone that you trust, a healer, another healer who you trust, tells you, "Hey, here's what I'm doing, here's what I'm seeing, this is what is working," tends to give another healer more confidence, like that. Like even with your EMDR, which I recall, I think you've been trained in as well. I'm sure there was somebody who told you about what they were doing and things like that. You probably just didn't read a paper or see a client who had done it, or you heard about it from several kind of serendipitous clients like you happen to in your area. That's kind of fastly becoming another BrainPaint mecca, if you will. These small towns where a lot of people talk and things of that nature. We tend to grow better than we do in major cities. But anyway, when people come from other providers, there seems to be this different kind of a connectivity. There's certain similarities that you would have with other clinicians who you share thoughts and things of that nature with, and mutual understandings and philosophies and that kind of a thing. When it comes from a client, it might be different on some level. But ultimately, doing your own sessions is by far, like for everybody, it's like magnitudes more valuable than anything you can possibly learn about the technology. When you do a session, and even if your first session, you just have a neutral first experience, your brain goes, "Oh, your brain knows what's dangerous and what's not dangerous way more than we do. And your brain knows when something is capable of being damaging and when it isn't. So when you have your own experience, even when it's not, even if you have no positive response from one session, which we see statistically doesn't tend to happen. It does happen once in a while, and those cases really stand out a lot when someone does one session and things are better. I would say maybe with the exception of people with brain damage. But anyway, that they respond often with one session. But by and large, if we do a session on yourself and then you have no experience or a positive experience or even somewhat of a negative experience, your brain will get what it is and what it isn't on a level that I can't teach anybody essentially. But that'll go much further. But yeah, I'm excited about about our call here today to kind of cover some more of that stuff in more detail.
Okay. Thank you, Bill.
Welcome. And anyone else have a question or comment or follow up? All right, everyone. So, Kat, all right, but goodbye, everybody. We'll talk to you all next week, if not sooner, for one reason or another. And again, feel free to shoot Allison an email to set up a call if you feel like that might be helpful for you also. Otherwise, we'll talk with you all next week. Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.
Oh, and Kathleen, maybe you two could stay logged in here, and we can communicate through the computer, because you're more clear actually than if we were on a telephone. And then I can also show you some things on the screen and stuff like that. Cool.
Okay.
But I'm going to actually, I should probably dismiss the others in the room. You probably didn't want this to be sort of a group experience, correct, Kathleen?
No, not really. Thank you.
All right. Well, all right, Rivers.
All my insecurities on display.
I understand. Yeah, no problem. All right, Riverstones, I'm going to dismiss you from the meeting. I think you might have walked away from the machine already. I'll talk with you guys next week. Bye-bye. All right, bye-bye, Gabby. Talk to you next time. All right, Kathleen, now it's just us.
Okay.
And so are we waiting for your friend to come, or are they there with you?
My friend is here with her skull available to me. I promised her I wouldn't do anything other than put on the sensors, though.
Oh, excellent. Well, we could actually, it might be valuable to run a session when we do a thorough, because I planned on actually walking you through the assessment tool. And
I don't know.
What's that?
That's not our agreement. She's okay with it. And she doesn't have a personality disorder or obsessions, so it's all good.
Very good. And that she doesn't have sort of moderate to severe obsessionality either, correct?
No.
So she is a great candidate. All right. So currently, what do we have there in your room in terms of the equipment? What state is everything in right now, Kathleen? Like, you have your.
Are you talking about BrainPaint, or everything is hooked up?
Okay, it's all.
It's all hooked up. I've got the sensors here, and I've got my paper towels and my rubbing alcohol and my conductive goo. So yeah, that's all here.
That's perfect. Okay, and is your BrainPaint computer turned on yet?
It is turned on. It's not hooked up to the. I find that if I don't need it hooked up to the internet, do I?
Yes and no. You will eventually need to have it connected to the internet to get more sessions.
Right. But I mean right now, because I just